This is the string guide for two-piece stringing for any kinds of racket. The two-piece stringing method can be used for most, if not all, kinds of tennis racket, and it is the most fail-proof string. We are going to be stringing on the Prince P7000 electronic 6-point string machine, and the racket that we'll be stringing is the 16x19 oversized Prince CTS Storm. So to start off, we will need to cut off the existing strings on the racket. Once the strings has been cut off, we'll proceed to mount the racket onto the machine, starting off with the top and bottom points to hold the racket, and then turning the knobs to tighten the side mounts just enough to hold the racket. And note, you do not want to over tighten your racket, as it may cause the racket to warp even before you start stringing. We would be using a brandless synthetic guard for the string job today. So when stringing from wheels, you can take reference of the pre-measured length of the string in comparison to the length of your arms. So you can just measure using your arms moving forward. So the vertical strings are the mains and the horizontal strings are the cross. So for stringing of rackets, generally we would string the mains first and then the crosses. Once the strings has been cut to length, it's always good to apply a light coat of lubricant such as Vaseline to reduce the friction between the strings when passing one another. So to start off, we'll pull one of the strings through the center two grommets, and for the two-piece string method, you will need to make sure that strings are even in length when it's through the center two grommets. Once the strings are even in length, clamp either side of the strings and use a starting clamp as a secondary clamp in case your swivel clamp slips. Once the clamps are secured, proceed to pull the tension of the first main and clamp it off near the frame. So like any string job, pull tension on the mains and alternate on each side after 3 strings have been pulled to make sure that the pressure on the head is evenly distributed. Always try to clamp the string as close to the racket frame as possible to minimize uneven tension on the mains. And for the two-piece stringing method, we will need to string all the mains and do the tie off on both ends. And note to always pull an additional 10% tension on a tie-off string to reduce tension loss, and you can use any knot you're comfortable with as long as the tie-off is secure. Now that both tie-off is completed, proceed to release the clamps holding the last two mains. Prepare the strings for a cross as you did on the mains. With the top cross and pull enough strings through to be able to pull tension on the top cross. And proceed to start to weave the second cross, pulling all the remaining strings through. So for this method that I'm using, it involves a starting block or starting clamp. So you will need to clamp and pull the tension on the top cross and hold the tension with a starting clamp. Otherwise, you can proceed to use a starting knot if you know how, but I prefer using a starting block or starting clamp. Once the first cross has been pulled and held with a starting clamp, start to weave and pull tension on the crosses from top to bottom. And always push the string upwards while passing the strings through the mains. Also, try to string one ahead so that it won't be hindered by the clamps while weaving for the next cross. Try to straighten the strings as much as possible while pulling tension on crosses to ensure a more dynamic and consistent tension throughout the racket. If you have excess strings passing through the mains, you may cut them off to reduce the length of strings passing through one another. Once all the crosses have been completed, it is now time to do the tie-off again. And please do as you did previously with the mains and always pull an additional 10% tension on a tie-off string to reduce the tension loss. Once the tie-off on the last cross is completed, release the clamps on the bottom and move to clamp the second cross before releasing the starting clamp to pull the tension on the first cross and do the final tie-off. Otherwise, you may tie off the top cross after stringing a few of the crosses on top as long as you have at least one clamp holding the tension of the cross. One tip for a tie-off is to find the tie-off grommet, and usually it is one with the bigger opening. It is always good to observe how the previous stringer has strung it and to identify the grommets before cutting off the strings. And to finish off, you can release the clamps on the strings and straighten the strings one last time before releasing the rackets from the machine. So to end off the video, I'll show you two other examples of the rackets that have been strung with a two-piece string method. So this is the Technifiber T-Fight 270, and it has 6 grommets at the throat and the mains ending at the bottom. So it has 3 knots on the bottom and 1 knot on top. This is the most typical 16x19 string pattern in the market. So this is the Wilson blade. It also has a 16x19 string pattern, has 8 grommets at the throat with mains ending on top. Thus it has 3 knots on top and 1 knot on the bottom. And if this racket was strung one piece, it would not require the around the world method, as it could just be strung from top to bottom without having to go around the racket. And that would conclude the video. Thank you.